Okay, well, we come to our presentation today, which is a subject on the Red Hill Skate Arena. Many of you know with the building of Colonogga Terrace, so to tell you all these details and the history of it, I present Andrew Darbyshire and Mark Louttit. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Louttit. Welcome to everyone, including we've got a few skaters, ex-skaters today, who might even be able to share some stories a bit later in the presentation. The presentation is in two sections. Andrew is going to present the first section, which covers the ancient history of skating in Brisbane, covering more than the last 100 years. And then I'll take over when we get to Red Hill and talk about some of the detail of Red Hill. I was a skater at Red Hill for about 10 years, from about 1972, and got to know a lot of amazing people through that place, and have managed to reconnect with some of those people in the last couple of years. So anyway, I'll hand to Andrew to kick us off.
Well, I'm very much Mark's support act today. I'm a non-skater. Some of you may remember I came here probably 4 years ago now and gave a talk about early skating in Brisbane, where it started. I'm going to cover a little bit of that, don't be concerned. It's only going to be a short summary of what that is all about. Talk a little bit about the site where the Red Hill skating arena is, and then hand over to Mark. So, skating in Brisbane, where did we start? Anybody recognise this building? This is the original exhibition building. Nice timber building, right at the start of when we had the exhibition. It was up there at Bowen Hills. And our first skating rink, our proper first skating rink, was actually the new floor was constructed within it. The gentleman you can see here in cartoon form is a gentleman called Mr. Skinner. He was an American. He'd come to Melbourne to help a fellow American set up the first skating rink in Melbourne. He did some work in Sydney as well. He thought, why am I helping somebody else make all this money? Because it was very popular when he first started off in the 1880s. So he disappeared back to America, came back with a whole load of equipment, including shoes and things like that, skates, and set up a rink in the exhibition building. Unfortunately, one night it burnt down. So while it was under his tenure, if you like, so I think we can probably say, we can draw a bit of a long bow, but we could say the new exhibition building, which most people will think of as the old Queensland Museum, owes its life to roller skating. So he did the first one. Interest was very high. He could get 1,500 people through that rink in a day. They had morning sessions, they had lunchtime sessions, they had evening sessions, all slightly different. Some people came to watch people fall on the bum. Some people came to learn to skate, and they had professionals who would teach them to do that. Not really a sport in that day, more recreation. So people got interested, realised there was a bit of money there, and our first purpose-built rink was made. Shares were floated in early April. By June it had been built. And this is a sketch of the inside of it. It was on the corner of Albert Street and Adelaide Street, where the town hall now is. This sketch is actually from the Brisbane History Group research library, which I look after. And we've also got things like, that's a bit of a push for the Brisbane History Library here. We've also got a copy of the builder's diary, and there's an entry in the builder's diary where his tender was accepted to build. So it was a great success. The original shareholders, they were so keen that they were getting dividends of sort of 15 and 20% every month. A lot of people coming through, but unfortunately within about 6 months they'd gone bust. So a new company took over, blamed the old company for all the problems they had. The old company blamed the fact that the building had been extended by 2 bays within a month of it being open. Some people blamed the architect. The architect was very upset because he'd take part of his fees for doing the work as shares, which were now worthless, so he was out of pocket as well. But look, the Columbia sort of lasted for a number of years, and there were quite a few other skating rinks opened during the late 80s there. So we had the exhibition building, Centennial Hall in Adelaide Street had just opened, and that was, they ran a rink in there. Generally, not necessarily purpose-built skating rinks. The one at New Farm was, and obviously the one with Columbia. But very soon after them opening, it becoming very popular. We had the 1890s floods, we had the bank collapses, and we moved into a bit of a roller skating drought, as I call it. The Columbia continued, not very successful as a roller skating rink, because roller skating in those days was seasonal. It was a winter activity. We didn't have ventilation systems. People were still dressing in 3-piece suites and long skirts, and, buttoned up to here sort of stuff. So there was a bit of a skating drought. It struggled on to the end of the 90s. And the building eventually became all sorts of things. It was a boot factory, it was a leather works, it became a car showroom at one time until it was taken over for the building of the City Hall. There was a bit of a surge after, from around 1910, and a series of other skating rinks opened, some of which I can't locate at this stage. So if anybody knows where any of those ones, like the one at Grand Central, which was adjacent to Central Station, I'd be very interested in finding out where they were. One that did sort of continue through was the Glideway, or the Brisbane Railway, and that was on the corner of Melbourne and Cordelia Street in South Brisbane. Open air, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So what was happening in this sort of revival in the 1900s? Again, very popular. People probably had a bit more money in their pockets. You could actually go out and, wear a short skirt. You could show a bit of calf, things like that. Very exciting. Or they would have special evenings that would be sponsored by employers or businesses. This is a lady you might be familiar with. This is Miss Stevens from this area. Her father ran the Telegraph, so she had a dress on that she made up all from the pages of the Telegraph. These fine-looking gentlemen, they were advertising Coulson Studios. And this idea of having men in ribbons as a coach and four sort of thing was just one of those strange sort of features. Entertainment became a little bit mixed at this time. Not only could you go skating, but you'd probably have a couple of acts as well. You'd have a singer, or a band, or something like that. So it's like a mixed evening entertainment. Generally called continentals, which were varied entertainment evenings. And then the other thing that was coming through was our own film industry. West Film, they advertised that they would go to the Glideway, South Brisbane, and photograph and film what was going on, and within a day later, or a weekend later, they would actually show the film while people were skating. So we might just see if we can see a little bit of this early film, which is from the National Film Archives. They have a fascinating array of
pitching a new product. Grammarly's tone suggestions can offer a more personable approach.
So it's a silent movie. This is about 1910, really early sort of film stuff. So this is what you wore when you went skating in 1910. All there is to life. Men could skate with men, women could skate with men, kids could skate with anybody. And lots of different characters in between.
Excuse me, what was it for?
This was a sealed concrete floor. It was open air. Open air theatre.
That was the Blue Moon, wasn't it?
Oh no.
That wasn't it?
Well before the Blue Moon.
Oh, was it?
Not far away though. Not far away, on the corner of Melbourne and Portier Street.
So Andrew, when I was doing a bit of research a few years ago after your presentation, this was a social activity that young ladies of the upper classes were actually allowed to go to without a chaperone. So it was very, very
Oh, we were pretty rough those men. Just wait till you see the women. And then they used to call this polo. Used to call it polo. Obviously after the. Yeah, as Lindy mentioned, skating was a family thing. The rinks were well run, because the other thing that was going on about the same time was that sort of the sister of roller skates, which were safety bicycles, were being introduced as well. And mothers weren't too keen on their daughters having too much freedom on a bicycle. Particularly if the maid couldn't go with them. So they couldn't, as Linda said, they couldn't chaperone. So it was pretty safe to send your daughter to the skating rink.
Competitive.
Pretty tough, wasn't it?
Sorry, what year was this?
1910.
Did that carry on to the West that ran the silent film thing in Pomona? He was West, the one that
West Films.
Yeah.
I think they were Sydney business.
Oh, okay.
Have you tried Hungry Jack's bed and breakfast menu with ham and cheese croissants?
Okay, so that was the glide away, and sort of typical of what was happening in the early 1900s. Film coming in, because that's an important aspect of what entertainment was about. So moving into the 20s, the glide away unfortunately had to close in, I think it was 1926, because the site was needed for the construction of the interstate railway, South Brisbane. So they had to take the site for it. Other places opened around the place. Notably the Rivoli, which is on Brunswick Street in New Farm. It's now, the building's still there, but it's now, I think it's an IGA supermarket. And the difference about the Rivoli was that they had started life as a tea garden, open-air tea garden, but eventually they built a building, converted it, so the Rivoli actually had a mixture of open air and enclosed spaces. And they sort of were pretty much the front runners in terms of combining skating and cinema all in one evening. And they would have sort of feature guests as well, like the Rolling Rollers up here, you know, defying death, the circle of death, and doing fancy tricks. Not that any skaters do fancy tricks at all, but
It's quite expensive. 1 and 6 is a lot in those days.
yeah, the 30s, yeah. But there were things changing in the 30s. I think everybody wanted to be, you know, Fred and Ginger sort of thing. So dancing, ballroom dancing was becoming more popular. So skating dropped off a little bit. And one place we mentioned before, which was the Blue Moon, that was when that came in. But the Blue Moon actually started as a dance venue, a palais de danse. I can't just remember the guy's name. It used to be this building up here, which was just upstream of the old Victoria Bridge. Originally it was a bicycle factory or something, but the guy converted it, opened it as a palais de danse. But the guy who used to run the Glide Away roller skating, a guy called Christopher Flanagan, when the Glide Away closed, he went up north into the regions, and he ran skating rings all the way through the regions, you know, Rockhampton, out west and things like that. He actually took over the Blue Moon, and it's then that it's suddenly just before the war, 1939 sort of thing, it became really a skating venue. And he was very important in, I think, the development of modern day skating as well. So he ran the Blue Moon, and it was during the Blue Moon time and post-war that really competition started, you know, with hockey, with figure skating and things like that, and it became Brisbane and you know, Queensland sort of competition as well. Unfortunately, had to close to make way for the new Victoria Bridge.
Do you know anything about the Blue Moon?
Well, there we are. Could have had a better introduction, couldn't we? Yeah, look, the Blue Moon had a bit of a shaky time during the war. For some reason, Christopher Flanagan, the mayor of South Brisbane, didn't get on with it, and I'm not quite sure why. It may have been something with about his, you know, whether he joined up in the First World War or whatever, I don't know. But it nearly became a club for American coloured soldiers. You know, they practiced segregation, even in entertainment and all that sort of stuff. But no, it persevered, and it actually acquired a lot of war benefits during the war. And as they continued to about 1960, it was in the basic form. It was constructed for a palais de danse, although they did have a couple of changes in the type of floor they used. And eventually they did actually have a metal floor. As a non-skater, I wouldn't say something. Floors are very important. The type of floor you have in a skating rink is very important. You know, what suits a ballroom is great in one direction, but when you go around a corner or something, it's rackety right. So floors are important. And they tried all sorts of things, from metal to concrete to timber on edge and all sorts of things. So what was emerging after this was closing was what got me interested in roller skating, or the history of roller skating. Some of you may recognise this building. This is the Inala Sports Centre. When Inala satellite town was being built, they built enough houses to house about 14,000 people in the 50s because of the post-war housing problems. One of the companies that did the work was the Boss Brothers, South Australian company, and they were concrete experts. They started off with an order book of about 250 houses, and they eventually built over 1,000 concrete houses for Inala. They wanted to put something back into the community, so they arranged for the design of the sports centre by the architect Chesterton Bretnell. Leading edge sort of stuff. You know, this was when sports centres were first being considered, both here and around Australia. And they built the sports centre. Did a great job. It's due for demolition sometime. Whatever the architect put on paper, they built in concrete. So it's going to be interesting when they come to take it down. This is a shop from inside at the moment where they've had a few problems with floors and it's changed and things like that. Great builders. They also built a cinema, but they were lousy entertainment operators. So in the end, a guy called Con Galtos, this is Con here, took over. Some of you might know him as, I think he was chairman of the Liberal Party for a number of years. He and his family, they made it a business and ran it well as primarily as a roller skating rink. But it's during this time that he was quite an influence, and other people around Brisbane, that the sport began to develop. No longer was it all based on American sort of rules and figures and all that sort of stuff. We got our own state and national and international competition. So that all happened during, you know, the 60s and the 70s. He was involved in several other ventures around the place, Ashgrove and places like that. So it entered the modern era. Okay, well, let's come back to Red Hill, shall we? Again, back in the 1910s, we were still making films. This is a shot from a film called Thunderbolt in 1910. And I think I'm right in saying that Australia made the first full-length feature film, Meg Kelly, you know, that sort of era. I started looking through Trove to find a little bit more about what was happening on our particular site, and there's sort of information from sort of 1912, 14 about showing pictures in what I believe was probably an open-air theatre. I've seen, this isn't Red Hill, by the way, this is Graceville, and I've seen some suggestion that it wasn't on the site where the skating arena was. It was actually on the other side with an Opera Terrace, but I've not been able to confirm that. If anybody knows that, let me know. It seems to have been organised by a company called Stevens and Ogilvy. Particularly during the war, they were organising patriotic benefits, evenings and things like that. They were also involved in some of those other skating rinks I was talking about before. The word pops sort of appears around about 1915 during the war. And it seems to continue showing pictures all the way up through 15, 16, 17. Around about 1920, the new building was built. So this is a rear view. This is a rear view of that. And the back end of Musgrave Terrace and Opera Terrace through here. New company. It was called the Red Hill Pops. Bertie Moore was the secretary and the man who ran the place. described as a fine new picture palace with seating for 1,400 people. Well, less than 1,400 people. One or two problems, usual in the sort of 1920s. Bertie Moore got floored one night while he was counting the takings, so a little bit of sort of, you know, rough and ready around the place.
Excuse me, was the police station next door at that point?
And very handy it was too. Very handy it was too, because on the evening of the 24th of October 1927, approximately 7:30 in the evening, 3 larrikins set up a series of firecrackers while there was a movie on. So they were hauled off to the police station next door. But look, by the end of the 20s, you know, things were running a bit thin, I suppose. And I noticed there's an ad in the paper that somebody wants to sell their shares in the theatre. I don't know whether it was Mr. Moore or not, but they were offering to sell £1 shares for $10 shillings, so half price. And it wasn't long after that, perhaps in the early 30s, that the actual building went up for sale. So Popular Pictures obviously went into receivership of some sort. They were the building owners. It went to auction, but in 1932 it actually passed in, so it wasn't sold. And then a new owner took over. He converted it to the new State Theatre. He was an existing operator who operated things in the valley, and it took on a slightly different focus. Still showing movies and things, but it became part of that ballroom dancing. These are just some pictures from when it opened, and also when it was set up for a federal Labour ball, so they would have balls and things there. I've noticed that over time, the building seems to have been very much used for the Labour Party, either federal or for local stuff. So I don't know whether that area was a particularly Labour stronghold. In fact, back in the early days, there was a rally up there held. This is 1917, what mentioned that. And the guy who was going to talk was Mr. Clay, and he was part of the Nationalist Party. So he got a rounded, you know, a really nice welcome with eggs, tomatoes, stones, and even a potato. We didn't get a very good welcome at all. So there was a makeover, bit of a makeover. One of the things you will see is these feature trusses. They're a feature of the building. 1920s building, they were metal trusses. And in the 30s it had a bit of a mixed use. During the war it was used for air raid precaution, training, issuing ration cards. Valerie in 1945 lost her heart-shaped brooch. I don't know whether she ever found it as well. But look, cinema was going through a bit of a lean time, I suppose, during that time. They tried to inject a little bit of new blood in the 50s, late 50s, and our architects, if you remember, back on Inala, Clyde Jessup Bretnall, they did these sketches, and there was a bit of a makeover for the thing. Well, I'm assuming it was done, because it was late 50s. Does anybody remember going to the State Theatre when it was a cinema? Is that a reasonable representation of what it might be?
I can't remember anyone that. That would have been a little bit later.
Yeah, okay. So a bit of an architectural refit, and it seems to have gone through a few different people's hands. Skavlos and Mondi, Souris, not our current Peter and his brother Souris, but probably their uncle, I think, who was mainly into cinema. I think Venables was the last man to actually run it as a cinema. before it took on a new life. And that's where I'm going to end. Let Mark talk about its new life.
Yeah, so it had a very brief life in the mid-60s as a live music venue called Teen City. And you can see some of the performers that were involved in that. Yeah, so from here I'm going to mainly focus starting with a bit of a bridge from where Andrew has been taking us, just looking at some, not all, but most of the skating facilities that were around Brisbane in the 70s when I first became interested and involved in these sort of things. So of course Red Hill is quite active and involved. There was a skate arena at Stafford that has only just closed in the last couple of years, subject to redevelopment. Right. None in Brisbane proper. There's the closest that I'm aware of is DigiSkate, which is at...
It's Digi still running.
Whereabouts?
It's in Hillcrest on Johnson Road.
Right.
But they've actually got a new one, brand new complex opening up in the coming months.
Yeah, so they'll actually be two run by the same. And there were other facilities at Albany Creek, Malcolmat, Anala, Wollongabba, Five Ways actually upstairs. The building's still there, but the Cleveland, Redcliffe, Browns Plains, they were everywhere. There was one at Gaythorne, Mitchelton. The building is still there. It's a pet store, yeah, nice and yellow, next to the railway line.
Add on to that list is Newtown.
Oh, okay.
That was in Toowoomba.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know for sure, but I have heard and I only found out afterwards escaped because it escaped in the 70s and 80s. That's where the floor from the Blue Moon went to.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a steel floor. And
right.
When we fell over, we had red pinstriping.
And speaking of relocations, Festival Hall used to televise a roller derby, and they had a banked track in Festival Hall. And when that became defunct, the track was removed and landed in a paddock at Greenbank, and Dave and myself and a few other probably people in the front row actually used to go out there and skate on it until the weather just but it was good while it lasted. And there were a couple of ice rinks as well, and there may well have been more.
Bank track.
Sorry?
It was a bank track.
Yeah. It was a very different experience for those of us that had only skated on flat tracks before.
You know there's one at
Currently?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I've tended not to. There are other regional towns that have had skating rinks. This is not intended to be a total, but it's intended to capture the main ones.
I'll just tell you, every 6 months of the year it's a skating rink, and then the other 6 months it's an ice skating rink.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In Caloundra?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
As you come in the Caloundra, on the left hand side.
In the industrial?
Yeah, we skated up there.
Right, good. So just, I think we all know where we're talking about. The building is Waterworks Road coming out of town, and Enogra Terrace here. It's just near the corner, and as has already been mentioned, there used to be a police station next door in what's now the car park. We'll get back to that in a minute, but the police station, yeah. This is a Google Maps image from a couple of years ago, just looking in that same direction of the maps, that building on the right. other buildings in the neighbourhood, and we'll talk a bit about other activities associated with Red Hill Skate Arena as well, the shops and businesses nearby. Again, an old picture from earlier last century.
Why was it called Pops?
Yeah,
It's
It may have been an acronym for something.
Popular Pictures.
Yeah, possibly. It
something
seems
of the people show or something it was
Yeah,
called.
probably.
Yeah,
I can't exactly remember what it was.
yeah. This is
People
one of the
say
first. This is the first of two slides plotting the brief history of the skate arena. So it was Pop's People's Own Picture Theatre back in the 1920s. We've talked about that. Then it was renamed State Theatre in 35, and I'm reliably informed the projectionist for that facility was one Alf Hansen. Good old Alf. And then a dance floor was added in the mid-30s, and Andrew talked a bit about that, about the combination of entertainment facilities, and I guess this facility and other facilities evolved as interests and tastes changed. Then it became a short-lived live music sound lounge called Teen City, only for about a year or so. I understand there were noise complaints, and some of the artists that performed there included the Bee Gees, Little Paddy and Coldjoy. There was a local band who I've gotten to know some of the members called the Purple Hearts, and they also played there. I think that they would have been. Sorry?
Max Merritt as well.
Yeah. And then it became the Red Hill Skate Arena in 1965. The picture is not I don't think actually from Red Hill itself, but there are pictures from Red Hill coming up.
See where it says State Arena? It's, somebody said once before that it was easy to change the T to a K. For the,
oh yeah.
State
Arena.
Yeah. Somebody said they did that.
Yep. So part two of the brief history, there was a temporary closure in 1973. Now I was already there and I'd met a number of other skaters at that time, and we had serious withdrawals during that time. We even ventured to other skate arenas. And it was closed, I think, for about 6 months. Yeah. And that was to enable the complete removal of the wooden floor and the pouring of a pre-stressed high-tech concrete floor, which then was later augmented with a polyurethane surface.
It's the only thing that survived when the roof fell in.
Yeah. And anyway, it was owned at that stage, and I believe while it was the music venue by David Venables, and the managers when I first were there were Billy and Betty Ikonoff, legends. And they pretty much ran everything to do with this skate arena, so the candy bar and the hire shop and ticketing and all of that. Then there was a change of management, and an English fellow called Ron Irving arrived.
He actually ran Redcliffe Rink before
Yeah, he had
came
come
in.
from Redcliffe, yeah. And he was a real character as well. I'll tell you a story about him later. But he brought a new influence, I guess, and energy to the skate arena, and he had been an English figure skating champion, and he brought that discipline to the skate arena, and so apart from the regular things that were happening at the skate arena, there were figure skating practice and competitions happening, which came with that. Then I'm told that in 1995 the DeWitt family managed the skate arena. I was no longer involved in the skate arena at that stage. I'd moved to Melbourne or whatever, but I'm told that that's what happened. And then in 2002 there was a fire, an arson attack on the building, and the fire that caused so much damage to the building. After that, it was placed on the Brisbane City Council Heritage Register some years after that. The building lay dormant, and I'm about to show a short film that shows some really good footage of what the building was like during that time. And then in 2017 it was purchased by the Souris brothers, Peter and Stephen, and they've converted it back into the cinema that it is, multi-cinema that it is now. So I'll just try the technology to show about a 3-minute film. It runs about 7 minutes, but I'll just show the first 3 minutes or so of footage from within the building. Bear with us.
features that they were designing to refit were actually built, so it was built at architectural plan.
Kill it? I like radial skater and it just won't die. Anyway, at the skate arena, these were typical activities that happened there. So general skating sessions during the day and evening, figure skating, The picture here is, the fellow in the picture figure skating is Gary Erding, this elder son of Ron. The other two pictures aren't actually shot at Red Hill, but indicative of the sort of things that were happening there. Roller hockey was introduced to Red Hill during the 70s, and speed skating, some roller derby and beginners lessons. But I just wanted to focus a little bit on roller hockey for a tick. One of the people who've come along today is Noel Doyle, and Noel was
he was the instigator.
He was an instigator.
Yeah, he got it going.
And he actually got so the skate arena was a real focus, social focus for people, and I think the addition of roller hockey gave certain people within that community a focus and objectives and whatever in their lives. So, Noel, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, you don't know.
Look, I'd love to, but Cliffy will, he's got a better memory than myself.
Right.
But it was a good time, and yeah, I think at the time Red Hill did mean something like that.
Yeah, I think
it had the dancing and the speed at that time.
Yeah.
With Peter White.
Peter White.
And I think Peter represented the club in one of the nationals or the states.
Nationals.
Yeah.
Speed times.
Cliffy's got a sounder memory than I have. So.
Right. No, that's okay.
So what year are we looking at?
In the 70s.
70s.
Yeah, around, I'm thinking around 75 would be about when the hockey got underway.
And
Well, how it first started was, Noel and I've been mates for years. He used to play the game at five ways.
Yeah.
But but he skated at Red Hill anyway.
Yeah.
But he found that at five ways, and then Noel came over and said, what we need to do here, we need to get all the boys together and make our own team.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did, we got together, we started training in car parks and Inverpelly and everything like that.
Yep.
We started doing all that. Then finally, we got our team going at Red Hill, and it was a tough team too.
Yeah.
And
Rugged.
our first game was against Stafford.
Yeah.
We got beaten 33-2. Right? But the thing was that night we had there was a lady there called Mrs. Green. And Mrs. Green walked into Gordon Mellon and said, she said, oh, we're going to flog you blokes today, and we'll give them a bit of a touch-up. And Mrs. Green said, I'll tell you something now, she said, you might beat them on the scoreboard, but she said you won't beat them in the fight. Well, what actually happened that night when we played, Gary, another really good friend, Stuart Mellon and his son, they had a bit of a tussle, and they hit the deck, and he went to get up and get Gary slammed his head into the floor and busted his teeth. And there was a player called Jeff Gildersleeves. He come over and he's come in and he's hit me with the elbow and split my eye. So I lined him up and put him over the rail and give him a bit.
It was a bit.
But you know, that's the way we were. We played tough. And after that, everybody started making an hour right through that, and we were going to be pushed over.
Any referee?
Okay.
it's probably a bit of a little unknown fact that other than the skaters, I suppose, but Australia did have a hockey team in the Olympics.
We did.
Roller skating. I think it was Barcelona.
Yeah, there was Chris Raggett, Stuart Mellon, Peter,
Alex
Gudasov, and all that. But I mean, when we started the game, well, they were playing a long time before we started playing. But you know, the thing was they thought we were going to be pushed around and pushed over.
The thing was, we ended up skating with them at
Yeah.
Stafford in the end, didn't we?
Our first year we went to South Australia in second division. We come second in the second division championships of Australia.
Yeah.
So you know we did pretty well for a bunch of street kids.
Yeah. Okay, we'll keep moving along. Thanks. Thank you.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Was it I supported the team for a little while back then. Was it the Bruisers or the Bulldogs?
Bulldogs.
I can't remember. Just
No,
the name of the team.
The little bruises.
Bruisers. We had t-shirts.
Yeah, the chess squad.
So, while a lot of the photos up until now haven't actually been at Red Hill, this is an actual photo from Red Hill, say circa 76, mid-70s. Shot from the floor looking towards the front of the building, pinball machines and fantastic fashions on show.
Yeah.
The people in the photograph, Philip Topless, the guy with the crazy white hair, and Richard Eates down the front, and that's me. And the photo was taken by Karen.
Those flags.
One of the things that was, well, a feature of any of the skating rinks are the songs, and on the Red Hill Skate Arena Facebook page, there's quite a bit of discussion and contribution about songs that people remember from the day. So I'm just going to take people who might have been at Red Hill back in time
I
here a
don't think
little
you
bit.
actually need to have been at Red Hill to go back. Those songs.
Are you there?
I remember my dad having LPs with everything. Do it after. 40 teams.
This is a photo I took of the open day that the Surrey Brothers held in 2019. They'd acquired the building and cleaned up the debris and then repaired the framework of the building, but hadn't actually done the full fit out for the new cinemas. And they decided to open the building up to invite the community in. And they thought a few dozen people, maybe 100 people would turn up. Well, heaps of people turned up. And it was a really great day. And maybe as an indicator of the way times have changed, there was an election coming, and the Liberals were.
You know, even when you walked in there, a couple of years ago we walked in there, we all met for coffee. And when you walk in there, that smell is still there. And you walk in there, as soon as you walk in there, it just hits you, and everything, just all the memories and everything just comes back to you.
Yeah. This is a photo from the same day. A couple of speeches involving Peter and Stephen. This probably doesn't actually really show how many people were there that day. It was
There were two or three versions of that all the way through.
Yeah. The other thing we'll get to in a second is you'll see on the walls, and you would have seen in the video, that while the building was derelict, street artists had come in and painted images on the walls, and also to some extent on the outside of the building as well. some of those artists were pretty much unknown when they came in and did that, but have then gone on to become quite famous international artists. And I'll cover a little bit of that in a minute. This is an image from the outside of the building. Interesting juxtaposition here of the cars and the spray and the flames. The angle is, looks like the car's being flamed. Yeah, yep. And that's the name of the artist. This is a collage of some of the artworks inside. I've actually been in there and photographed everything that I could capture inside the building. And with the redevelopment of the building, some of the artwork has been impeded, but the brothers have kept a lot of the artwork as a feature of the building as well.
I think just having a review of this reminds me of, I mean, if you walk through central and fringe Brisbane these days, there's lots of street art. Some of this you can see, as Mark was saying, I think they've gone on to do bigger and better things over their community.
Yeah. Then I turned my mind to other things that were happening in the general neighbourhood. Probably the first important point to make, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, was that Red Hill and the surrounding suburbs, Paddington, Colton Grove, Ashgrove, Beatrice Terrace, were largely, not exclusively, but largely working class suburbs in those days. I went to school at Colton Grove, and it was a very big school, but lots of down-to-earth type people. In the general neighbourhood next door to the Skate Arena was the Red Hill Police Station, which in those days was also a residence for the senior police person. So that came into play, as mentioned before, but also in relation to some of the other shenanigans that happened around. Do you have anything you want to?
Well, the local sergeant was there. He was Eddie Roslin, and he used to drink a bit too. He didn't mind to drink. We used to drive home from the Norby Hotel. It was Red 64. But if any blues started or anything like that, he used to call us all gutter snipers. He used to get us and line us up, and he'd say, right, I'm going to get you back tonight. So he'd pile us in the police car, he'd take us all up the top of Mount Nebo and say, enjoy your walk. We used to walk all the way, but it was just, do it today.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our punishment, but we used to cop it and everything like that. But if anybody had to go out there, our sergeant were around, they'd have to go through us too, because as he used to say, this is your backyard, you need to look after them. So we used to.
Yeah. So other things that were in the neighbourhood, Red Hill Mediterranean Restaurant, Morris Cavola had that. While there'd been Italian restaurants in the Valley and West End, etc., this was kind of a bit of a movement of those sort of restaurants into the suburbs, and the Red Hill restaurant was one of the first of those. Sylvia's.
Where was that, Mark?
Sorry?
Where was that? Musgrave Road.
I'll show you a picture of the
Oh,
building.
I think I know, yes.
Yeah, almost immediately across the road.
Yeah.
I'll show you a picture of the building and point to it. I think it's the next slide. Silvio's Pizza was within 100 metres around the corner, so a couple of young guys started up this crazy idea to cook pizzas and home deliver them.
Yeah.
That'd work. Sorry?
They sold
Domino's, yeah. Great.
That's where
And
he
then,
started, wasn't it? He started there at Red Hill.
yeah. their dad owned the stripper shops, and they, Louis and Sue's handcrafted seafood next door, Golden Goodness. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute too, but this is right next to this, to the skate arena. People going to the skate arena would often gather there first, play pinball or pool or whatever, and then skate, and then maybe be there again afterwards. And just another point, about 50 metres up the road on the other side of Enoggera Terrace was a house that was occupied by Black Hewlands members. Few shenanigans associated with that as well. And the other thing is that a couple of those people were regular skaters as well, so there was kind of a connection there. This is the building that is and was across the road, and it's this shop here, which is where
the chemist shop.
Sorry?
Used to be the chemist.
Yeah. What years would that have been?
Before my child, through my childhood and before.
Yeah.
Broaders.
During the
50s.
Yeah, during the late 70s, Morris created a Mediterranean restaurant there.
Then it became Olivetti's, Le Figaro, a few others.
Yeah.
And LaCorn.
Yeah. And they've extended an exterior area on that one. You'll see that the date on the building is, and this may fit with what Andy was saying before, this may well have been the site for the original open air facility that was replaced by that. We don't know that for sure, but that's a possibility.
Good story.
Yeah, let's pop that one in. This is Louis' house.
Their surname was Petrinos.
Yes, that's
They
it.
were Greek. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Super! Well done. Used to go there.
Yes, I could say the long story.
Oh.
I had the business for 36 years there.
Yes.
I could tell you lots of stories about the police.
Oh, yeah.
About the police and also about this one over here. About the little gangs and the Nala gangs. A lot of stories. I should have written a book.
Yes. Not too late.
So I had the shop from 1970 to 36 years. Pardon?
I was there from 1970 to the fire.
Right.
Where's Louis?
Louis, and he's at home.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he's at home. We've got our son, one in a wheelchair, second one.
Yep. Multiple.
Kirk.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Thanks so much for that. That's such a surprise.
Yes, I'll tell you lots of stories.
Good.
And the pop,
This
going
is
back to
treatment
cinemas,
patients. Go there, get
the
the-
boys,
Yeah.
the 1920s Pops Theatre,
Yeah.
that's, I think it was the grandfather, the great-grandfather owned that. The Shortest family,
Ah, yeah.
that's the grandfather that owned Pops.
Right. Yeah. That would kind of make sense in terms of the maths.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And this is a photo of roller hockey skaters, taken on the day of the open day. That's correct, isn't it, fellas? And yeah, they're.
No, we went and had coffee that day.
Coffee that day.
Oh,
we
is
had
it?
coffee
Yeah,
at
we had a
the
ring.
shop across the road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So thanks so much for coming along and being part of this. We're not quite finished yet, but we're getting the home stretch. I borrowed from the Red Hill Skate Arena Facebook page. Unfortunately, it's a little bit out of focus, but I have included it because I think it's just a really good representation of the building in the mid to late 70s, I suspect. It's looking towards the front of the building, so from the back of the skate arena. It shows the new floor, concrete floor, and the shiny polyurethane surface. These features here are the projection holes from where the projection room used to be. And so the screen would have been at the back of the building.
See the lights, that light system that Vandal's got there,
Yep.
that come all the way from America.
Yep, and I was going to talk about that, thanks. We'll get there just in a second. So other things, and it's a bit hard to see because it's slightly out of focus, but the control room for the sessions was up there. It's where all the music was played from. It's where all the policing of behaviour that happened on the floor happened. People got sin bin and things like that. The main entrance was up here, and there's candy bar here. This is what used to be the skate hire and skate repair shop there. And David Venables had an office in behind there.
It was a nightmare going to the toilets, girls' toilets down 30 stairs and the bars on my
Yeah, that was.
Down on the stoppers. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the chandelier. So the chandelier was, as Cliffy says, an imported technical thing. And particularly during the evening sessions, the other lights would be turned off, and the chandelier would pulse in time with the music.
I used to call it Moonlight Couple.
Yeah.
So when the lights go, that's where you all the hands and feet, you get the girl in the corner. You hide behind all these little things here.
Pillars, the pillars, yeah.
All these
pillars, yeah. And the other feature, very high tech, was that there were UV black lights, fluoro tubes up the sides, and so when all the other lights were off and they were on, everyone who's in white is glowing.
But the poor girls at the toilets, what they should have done there, they should have made, the poor girls used to have to go down like about 20 odd steps back to the toilet, and the boys used to skate straight down. They should have swapped the toilets around, because we stand there, we take bets who would fall down the stairs.
Just a couple of really quick tales. So one about Ron Irving, like I said, he'd come from the UK, and he'd been involved in various aspects of entertainment in the UK, and he even had a nightclub in the north of England. And at one stage, he used to tell this story about how at one stage, early in the 60s, before the Beatles became really famous, of course, he was offered the Beatles to play at his nightclub for £600, and he turned it down because he thought it was too expensive. But he used to tell the story, you know, you have some regrets in your life.
He also mentioned that the IRA blew up his rink.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's why he came out here.
Right. Right. And as we've mentioned very briefly a couple of times, there was some pretty intense rivalry between the skating tribes. Even within Red Hill, there were factions, I guess, to a degree.
Well, art skaters, all the girls from dance skated. They thought we were a bunch of pigs. They didn't like us, and we didn't like them. So, you know, we used to call them the stuck-up ones. They used to prance around with it,
different word.
The other thing that I remember vividly is after skating, it was common for groups to head off and go to coffee shops. So I mentioned a couple there. Alfie's at Wollongabba, near the Aussie Nash Hotel. Alouette in George Street, so where the law courts are these days, right down the Rain Street end of downstairs. And Snuggle Inn in Milton. So those are all long gone, of course. But it sort of was an extension of the social activities. And The other thing that happened was after hours, car park skating or skating to the roads. So it was common for Red Hill to have participants in the Warana procession parade, that was invited or otherwise. It was also common, Dave, you might want to tell a story about car park skating.
Yeah, we used to always get permission to go down to King George Square car park. Whenever we went there, we'd ask the person at the gate on the ticket box, and they'd always say, as long as you keep at least 2 levels below. And so we used to go down and skate all the way down the levels and get towed up by the cars on the and in those days you could hang on to door handles, bumper bars, but these days you wouldn't be able to hang on anything. But yeah, and